African Stream, which has been banned. Lorato, very quickly, give us in 2 minutes what happened to African Stream. Tell us about them and the ban that they've been given. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm here in SA in the dark.
Sorry, don't worry.
Uh,
We don't need to see your face. Don't worry. You can even put your
yeah,
screen on if you want to. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. Struggling from the load shedding and all those things. Well, I don't even know what it is. But anyway, I think what we saw in the last month was the channel Africa Stream on Meta platforms, on the Google platforms, being taken down by the U.S. State Department because they say they are claiming that this is a Russia TV run channel, but we know that this channel is run out of Kenya,
Yeah.
by independent journalists who are really doing a lot of work in terms of investigating how global politics are affecting um, the African continent specifically, and how they are affecting the Pan-African agenda. Um, and of course, I think in the same way that we have been making maybe similar utterances in terms of the camaraderie that we experience when we're dealing with Russia and China, who are always at odds with American
Yeah.
policies.
Yeah.
Um, a load of other channels that are on these platforms, including this particular one that we are on, that could see themselves being threatened with
Yeah.
cancellation or demonetized or
Yeah.
things like that. So this is a way in which the American media empire is limiting narratives in terms of um, what it is, what
Yeah.
information people can have access to, and those kinds of things. I mean, um, we can speak from a South African point of view about the struggle that we've been having to balance between defending the rights of Palestinians, and at the same time being criticized for for not standing up for Ukraine
Yeah.
by being unpartisan and things like that. I think we covered that in the last conversation that we spoke about, that affected how the American empire empirical sort of narrative wants to drive conversations very undemocratically, while they democracy throughout the world, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. First of all, there are a lot of channels on YouTube which are sponsored by the US government, and nobody says we should ban them. Even we know that African Stream was not sponsored by Russia, but even if they were, the US is not at a war with Russia. So there's nothing in their constitution that should do that. But what they're saying is things that black people already know. They're saying that France was controlling Burkina Faso and those countries and they need to be kicked out. Now that they say it, they think stupid. They say, "Oh, it's Russia that's telling you to say that," as if we as Africans don't know who our persecutors are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the larger media the large capital gains from which they sort of benefit.
Yeah.
We know, for example, I mean, YouTube is a Google owned platform. And when we go into the
And
history of
sorry, Google is linked to the CIA. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
when we go into the history of Google, we see where it came from. I
Yeah.
think in fact, a lot of the technological advancements that we see and that we use, we understand were first used for military purposes.
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
and once that becomes outdated, then they introduce them
But also,
onto
they
the
still use
consumer
it for
market.
surveillance. Everything you do on Google is captured, and they use it for surveillance.
Sure. They capture all that data.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, there was a lot of talk around 2019 and 2020 in the Eurozone around how these big American corporations are using data. And of course, they are in an info war, or sort of like a cyber war,
Yeah.
with both Russia and China,
Yeah.
in how they are also, beginning to limit China's capabilities to integrate um, American platforms into Huawei and things like that.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I think in the grander scheme of things, that is Americans. I think they're going to lose a lot of revenue because the Chinese
Or they're going to lose.
are very great at creating their own things.
Yeah.
And they're happier to
Yeah.
do that. And of course, they also will be gathering data.
What you just said, this is why it's important for the African continent. Gaddafi wanted to make a satellite. Me and Saeed were talking about this. He wanted to make a satellite. He wanted to make a satellite in which we have our own platforms and everything, so we don't even have to go through China. We can do our own, and we'll have our own social media and everything, and all of our banks will be together through all of that. But I will say that I'm ready to join the Chinese system and the Russian system because they are smart enough to know that they won't limit our speech because our speech is not a threat to them because they're involved in fair trade with us.
No, I think this infrastructural development is very important. It's very strange when you think about it that a lot of the materials that are used to create these technical things and satellites
Come from
things that
Congo,
are being mined here in the continent.
in Africa.
Yeah. So I mean, one would wish that there would be a quickened awakening in terms of the leaderships of the different leaders of the different countries and the African Union in general, because I think they're still being a little bit diplomatic in how they are approaching matters of resource control and things like that. We only see this happening in the military run and governed states like Mali,
but it's still coming
Burkina
because
Faso.
as much as I don't like Julius Malema and EFF, if EFF ever comes to power in South Africa, they're going to align with those countries.
Okay, like Lerato rightly mentioned, US is not going to gain anything from this. I mean, the Chinese people, when it comes to technology, what US is just doing is to drive those people to be more innovative. Look at what happened between Huawei and Android. Huawei went on to develop their own app store. They have insanely good products, and now they're separated themselves from Android, and they're selling their products. Even if
sorry to interrupt you very quickly. China first came to the U.S. and said, let's work together. They said, fuck off. So China did theirs separately. Continue. That's what you're saying. Thank you.
So even if they don't have the same market share as Android, ultimately, they will have their own market share. And don't forget that labor cost is cheaper in Asia and China compared to the US. So at the end of the day, the unit cost of their product is going to be cheaper than those of Android and those of iPhone that are made in the US. So you're just driving these Chinese platforms and Russian platforms to become more innovative. And at the end of the day, they'll become independent and they don't have to depend on Android and the American system to operate. That's basically the way I see it. I mean, and they're politicizing it. And like Lerato rightly mentioned,
and also
the raw materials are taken from Africa.
Yeah. So I quite totally agree with Mr. Folabi there. He just simply summarized the whole thing. We all know America.
That was brilliant. Very brilliant.
America really just like being on top, always trying to control things, control every scenario, control what's going on in Africa and all. So, but I think it's gonna be a long show because people are now, we are in a social media age. So people now know that we don't have to rely on so, and there is always a substitute somewhere. It's just that for us to just develop it. Yeah, and I wish we have. All what it just takes is just for we just to have an African leader with balls, just like as Gaddafi.
Like Gaddafi.
Yeah, like what Gaddafi tried to do before they take him out. So all we just need is just a very serious African leader that can take on these Europeans.
Even I hate to say it, I think Lerato would agree with me. Even Malema, even Mbeki, those guys. Mbeki is a little bit in between. But all of these guys stood their ground. Zuma stood his ground and refused to join in when they went after Gaddafi. Quickly, Saeed finished, and we'll end with Lorato. Yeah, within a minute.
Yeah, so as I was saying, so all we just need is just a good leadership with balls that can take on these people. If there no, this thing is not a skyrocket. It's just that because of their selfish interests. That's why if they really don't want to grow Africa. So if they and there is nobody who can help us to grow Africa except
Yeah,
our African leaders.
I agree.
No any European country or even this one
And
that we're talking
and
about in
China.
China.
Forget them.
They are not. They are in
I'm
this
going to
for
end with
business.
this.
And the moment we got
So sorry, I don't want to.
we come to realize that, then the better
Okay, so I'm going
for
to
us.
say that, but also it's up to the civilians. And this is where activists like Lorato and all of them.
Of course, that's why I say we
not just our
Africans.
leaders.
That's why I say
The
we
civilians
Africans.
have to,
Our leaders are African.
because if we don't hold our leaders responsible, they won't. So take us out, Lorato, with like a minute or less than a minute, because we're running out of time. But we'll continue on Monday. Lorato, what are your last thoughts?
Yeah. I think I mean, it always to this idea of having to crush the imperial attitudes of the US. The US likes to be on top, but they also want to be sort of like isolationist